Hi, everybody. We are back with a first panel from our event. We have two panels, one in the first part, the second one in the second part, obviously. Our first panel, it's about a very interesting topic, social media and the freedom of speech. We have three speakers. You met already Nikos. I'm going to introduce him to the live. Hi, Nikos.
Hello.
Okay, we have Mr. Paata Sheshelidze. I hope I did the name right. He has to correct me if I just misspelled his name. Mr. Sheshelidze was a co-founder and has been the president of the New Economic School Georgia. Also, he was editor-in-chief for Library of Liberty publication. And right now, he has teaching various economic discipline as an adjunct professor at University of Georgia since September 2015, and the Black Sea International University in Tbilisi. He is also a popular economic expert in Georgia media. So welcome, Mr. Paata.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
And the third speaker, the last but not the least, it's our co-fellow from Ayn Rand, UK. And I'm going to introduce him, Razi Ginzberg. Hi, Razi.
Hi.
So social media, it's very popular and it's very fresh, because here comes the election in US, and you know that previously 4 years ago there been a huge discussion about the interfere of the social media. So please tell us what are about the social media and the free rights right now.
Thank you, Mirela. So I'll start by talking a bit about free speech in general, because free speech in a way is the field where the lines of the battle in the culture wars have been settled in the last years. And it's kind of an us versus them mentality. So a lot of people have become interested in ideas based on various controversies around free speech. That's how they've discovered Jordan Peterson, or the so-called intellectual dark web, or ideas around the importance of free speech. And quite often the position one takes in the free speech battles also indicates what will be their position in various other social issues. So that's obviously why it is an important topic. Now, what is the danger, though? The danger is that the so-called, so to speak, our side, quite often it is very important to understand how we can defend free speech properly and how we will not score own goals. Because if we don't support free speech based on the right principles, we might end up undermining free speech. So there are those who we know that they're against free speech. They openly say, I'm against free speech. But I want to raise the attention to those who are trying to defend free speech, actually, in a way, cut the brand where we are sitting on. And more specifically, quite often I see conservatives, or sometimes also some classical liberals, undermining the principle and the institution that is the basis of free speech. And this institution is property rights. Property rights. So there is no free speech without property rights. And to make this case, try to imagine free speech in Soviet Union, for example, or in North Korea. Even if these regimes were not so tyrannical, how would free speech look like? So you cannot own your house, you cannot own a newspaper, you cannot own a printing press, you cannot book a room in a pub because the pub doesn't belong to anyone. You cannot book a lecture theater in a university. You cannot have your own website. So even if someone technically allows you to, even if someone does not arrest you when you go out to talk, your freedom of speech is meaningless. So freedom of speech without property rights makes very, very, very little sense. So why do I say that our side of the argument quite often undermines free speech more than our opponents? Think about the campaigns against social media. Think about the campaigns by many conservatives against Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. By the way, I'm getting a bit of echo, so maybe my co-panelists should mute, or maybe it's just me. I think there's a bit of echo. Anyway, so think about the campaigns of conservatives against social media. What are they actually saying? They're saying that because these platforms show some political bias, and indeed, Facebook and Twitter do have political bias, and because these platforms have some arbitrary rules, and they apply these rules in an arbitrary way against conservatives, they're claiming that social media are censoring them. And they claim that something needs to be done. So, for example, we see that Prager University is engaged in a lawsuit against YouTube. And actually, Prager University considers it the most important lawsuit in the world. Why? Because it's about freedom of speech. So do social media are they actually censoring conservatives? Again, I'm the first who will say, yes, they do have probably political bias. And yes, they do have rules that they impose arbitrarily. And yet I will claim that this is not censorship. Because what is censorship? If we say that this is censorship, in a way, we make the same mistake that the left is doing. We confuse economic power with political power. So yes, Twitter has, quote, economic power. So for example, it can kick off Milo Yiannopoulos or Alex Jones or whoever else has been kicked off. Or they can shadow ban or whatever this is called, people. And yes, let's say they do this. But this is not censorship. Censorship is the use of force to stop you from expressing your views. So, for example, when that Scottish court imposed a fine to a comedian, Count Dankula, because they didn't find his comedy so very funny, and actually they thought it's racist or Nazist or whatever, this is censorship. When you have laws criminalizing immoral behaviors and abhorrent views, such as, for example, Holocaust denial, this is censorship. Because free speech also means freedom to express horrible views. Or when the jihadis go to Charlie Hebdo and they massacre the editorial board or whoever else was there, or when the mullahs in Tehran impose a fatwa against Salman Rushdie, well, this is not technically censorship, but it's the equivalent. You use force to make someone shut up. Now, the social media do nothing of the kind. They just wish not to deal with people on what is actually their private property. So they have a right to decide whether they will associate with you or whether they will not associate with you. And we have the right to say Twitter or Facebook is immoral or wrong or is contributing the wrong ideas, whatever. This is up to you, your judgment. But let's understand something, that social media canceling you, that is not an infringement of your rights, because you haven't got a right on other people's property to begin with. And I will close with the two usual objections. So usually people say, yeah, but social media, this would be okay for a publisher, so a publisher can discriminate, but social media are not publishers, they are platforms or they're forums. And we can discuss this later. But I think that's a legal technicality. And the solution of which is to understand that even if they're a forum, they should still be allowed to discriminate against anyone they don't like. So if, for example, I have a theater and my line is, yes, anyone can book this theater for whatever show. But if someone wants to, stage a show which is celebrating the life and work of Mussolini, I have a right to say, you know what, that's not according to my taste. For whatever reasons, sorry, you're not allowed to go there. And also notice how quite often the people who is like, oh, it's not a publisher, it's a platform, their next line of argumentation is, oh, and also Facebook is a monopoly, therefore there should be more government intervention against it. And the last argument, which usually is used against social media, which I consider the most morally, in a way, evil argument, is the one that says that, oh, Facebook has become too big. And now it's the new public sphere, or it's a, quote, monopoly, whatever that means. Notice what this does. This is actually telling to Facebook, because of your success, because you have done so well, your rights don't apply anymore. So it's a way of saying property rights are okay when you do well or kind of well, but the minute you become big, they don't apply anymore. The minute you become too successful, tough luck. Capitalism and free enterprise don't apply anymore. So, to conclude, we should be very, very careful and exceptionally vigilant with this temptation that we quite often have to, quote, stick it to the other side. It's like, oh, the left is doing things, but we should be doing the same. Because this blinds us and makes us become what we don't want to become. So our main difference from the other side is that we have principles. So let's stick to these principles. Thank you.
Paata, what's your...
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much. I will try to continue the issue that Nikos already touched, and I will try to express my view on free speech, media, and censorship. First of all, I'll start with definition. Social media. Sometimes, at least for me, it's like a little bit a strange combination of words, because it sounds like we are talking about something common, public sphere. But in fact, we are not having those platforms as a common or public. Most of those entities are private media platforms. And network of voluntary persons are joining those platforms and using them. Each of us, like me as a user of Facebook or Twitter or other spaces, we have walls, like our boxes and keys, because we can open what we wrote there or close. We can share with close friends or just make it widely open. So nobody's forced to come in my page or wall or box and check my information. So the private company offers space for us. We are using those spaces and interacting. This is what I see, and there's no common, there's no public, just private to private. Maybe in some areas, many individuals can see my page and I can see your page as many others, but still there are like interaction between individual space, private spaces. So to understand this, you will see, if you understand this, you see all those processes completely different. So now, imagine from the position of the owner of those spaces, for instance, Facebook owner. Well, of course, they have business and they're offering some space as they want to have profit. And since they want to have profit, they have some rules. If you are not fine with those rules, you can leave and look for alternatives. There are plenty of alternatives. So far, Facebook is best one, since a lot of people are on Facebook and using. For instance, I checked it just before our seminar, this interaction, 67% 3% of Georgians, we are about 4 million, have Facebook accounts. I check it in United States, even much more, like 73. So even more. So what I wanted to tell, Facebook for this moment, maybe is the best alternative among those platforms. But if Facebook will start to do something against users, they will use the popularity and somebody will move and move. We will move somewhere else with more flexible rules. So as the owner, Facebook, I'm just focusing on Facebook, the same with others. Facebook owner should navigate and keep their income in, otherwise they will lose the business. Well, in some cases, we might see that they might restrict some particular activity on the Facebook. For instance, just recently, since we have like COVID pandemic in many countries, like a very dramatic situation in most countries as well, some information was restricted concerning COVID. I'm not agree with those restrictions, but I try to explain how it works. So their mainstream view about COVID and there are other views. As I understood, Facebook tries to ban some alternative views. Not always possible, but trying, at least in English. In other languages, maybe not that easy for them, the algorithms to ban such alternative views. But point is that they're banning those views because the customers are loyal to this kind of ban. Well, it's good or not is another story. But by this way, they are keeping their customers in. Well, one point which is related to the censorship media platforms is more obvious in YouTube. And YouTube is completely banning a lot of different content. And there are a lot of rumors, maybe not only rumors, that owner of YouTube platform is very much cooperating with the states, United States itself, and a particular state in the country. There are such rumors. But since this company is in the United States, they might have some way to cooperate, and because they live there, they have to adjust in the situation. However, I don't like this, but I can explain. But alternative is to have another platform for the same content, same style of content, and we have it. And me in Georgia, you in Greece, you in Israel, we can create and introduce. But the problem is that we need the customers, and those companies, they are following the customers, and maybe we are not such typical customers. So we have like special views at some point, but point is that they have to adjust the situation and they live in this way. So one more point, and I will finalize. One more point is that today we have already a lot of alternative media platforms. And nowadays technology are making those platforms more easier to access and use. Most of those platforms trying to involve new technologies based on, for instance, blockchain principle or something like that, and adjusting the modern techniques of communication to make sure that information goes without third parties access. This is important, and this because this is about demand. It is why they are developing such programs, because there are demand for that. Information should go from me to you without interruption, without intervention from the third side and blocking. So those technology are allowing such kind of communication right now. And this is the future. And of course, more interactive communication is demanded by people. Because when we are exchanging views, we are also checking other position, maybe arguing with them, and maybe expressing our views more harshly or nicely or pleasantly. But point is that we need it, especially now when many countries have lockdowns. Unfortunately, we are not able to freely travel because of those situations. So it's only space where you can communicate. I wish to host you here in Georgia in some near day, but unfortunately, technically, now we are not that much free to do it and organize such events. So now we need a platform with maximum freedom, but same time, we should understand how the platform providers should think. That they also need the customers. They should to keep them. They might lose one or two, but keep the majority and have revenues. So it's also like business. Unfortunately, in some cases, state interventions, the business is trying to impose, but technology will try to avoid those barriers, to avoid this intervention from the state. So this is what I observing. And finally, thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak. And I hope our intervention and support to free speech will give it some results. Thank you.
Razi, it's your turn now.
Thanks, Mirela. And I second what Paata said. And thanks to Barbara and everybody at the Austrian Economic Center and the Free Market Roadshow. This is, the Free Market Roadshow usually takes place. It is an actual roadshow. It takes place in person. Now, this year, that wasn't possible, so it has gone online, which I think means there's at least one other person we should thank here, and that's Mark Zuckerberg, because while we enjoy, complaining about Facebook's policies, we are actually live on Facebook right now. Facebook provides us with this opportunity to reach a massive audience. This is not something that existed really before Facebook. The opportunity to whether it's just you want to share your personal life experiences or you want to express your ideas and so on, you can not just do so with a click of a button to numerous people. You can also do that, especially when it comes to promoting ideas. You can do that in a targeted way. You can pick your audience out of the entire world, the people who would want to be your audience, who you would want as your audience. And we're all making use of that. And whether or not we support their right to decide what can be allowed on their platform, it seems that pretty much everybody has some beef with Facebook. So I think we should acknowledge that we are making the choice to make use of their platform. In the vast majority of cases, again, it is for free. We're not even paying. And this is kind of what is very much wrong about this, the fact that people are complaining about the specific service that they are getting for free by somebody who is, who chose to create it. And but it is noteworthy that we are all, whatever we say, we are voting with our time and our money for Facebook. As you do in the free market, you vote every single time you use a product or a service. Now, my main beef on the free speech issue is with the so-called right, mostly conservatives, who sometimes still pay lip service to free market, but they are not defenders of the free market. They're opponents of it, and I think this is one of the best examples of it. I mean, here in the UK, a few months ago, there was an issue with a very famous and successful, or at least famous here and successful YouTuber, Brian Rose, who has a channel called London Real, who had an interview with a guy who, is a Holocaust denier. He also thinks that the world is controlled by shape-shifting reptiles that, actual reptiles that can change their form and become a human being or look like a human being, and they control. So he had this person on to talk about how COVID isn't real and it's all a conspiracy and so on. And YouTube decided to remove one of those videos. Yeah, I think he had him on for a few times. And I was watching Brian Rose on his YouTube channel complain about YouTube censoring him. And he was doing it with a straight face. He's on YouTube claiming that YouTube is censoring him. So again, I of course agree, that even if they removed everything he said, even if they remove you because they don't like your ideas, they don't like your face, they don't need to give you a reason. It's their platform. But people complain about it on the platforms that that they claim are censoring them. Now, I have to say, I would not be as generous as Mark Zuckerberg if I invite Nikos over for a cup of coffee and I tell him the options, and then he starts complaining and shouting, why are you not offering me a soy latte? That's what I want to drink. Why is there no soy latte on the menu? How dare you? I have a right to a soy latte at your home. I would not be polite in explaining to him how he can find a soy latte elsewhere, and yeah. But Facebook allows this, and it allows this to a very large extent, but to a limited extent, and they choose that extent. And I'm also often disappointed that I don't get to promote a certain piece of content because Facebook doesn't approve of it. But again, I see it in its full context, which is I can reach an audience that I could never reach had it not been for Facebook. Now, if let's say, Mirela, you decide that the Ayn Rand Center Romania is not using Facebook anymore, or if Barbara decided that the Free Market Roadshow is not going to be on Facebook, or if I decided that the Ayn Rand Center UK is not going to be on Facebook, nobody would claim that we are censoring Facebook, or that we are depriving Facebook of their right to our content. Why is that? Because our organizations, unfortunately, are still much smaller than Facebook. Maybe that'll change someday. But as Nikos mentioned, Facebook is specifically demanded. The demand is made that it provide that platform because it's so successful. And by the way, it's not just our organizations. We hear about the social media platforms that are successful enough for us to hear about them. We don't hear about the numerous attempts at creating platforms that fail, and nobody is going after those. We go after people for their success, just like socialists. Although somehow this is now a right wing thing. Now, people claim that social media is the new public square. They're not, as I mentioned, they're not new. They're not a new form of the same thing. There's something completely new. The old public square is still there. You can still write a letter to your newspaper, or you can still, stand on a soapbox in the street corner and shout from a megaphone, and maybe you'll convince people. But Facebook and other social media platforms have created a massive audience for that. Now, too many of us, unfortunately, seem entitled to. Now, here in the UK, recently there were protests against lockdown, which I have to just point out. I'm against lockdown. I'm against those protests. I thought they were, badly argued. But I remember going on Twitter after one of those protests was broken up because there was no social distancing and there was no masks, and I saw on Twitter people saying, well, yeah, this is okay, that this is broken up, but for example, Black Lives Matter protests that also had no social distancing and no masks weren't broken up because that cause is justified. Saying you can have free speech as long as you have the right views is being against free speech. And the same thing goes for free market. Saying I am for free market, as long as you run your company in the way that I would want to use and would make the most use of your service or product is being against the free market. As Nikos mentioned, you can't have free speech without property rights. You also can't have the free market without property rights. And anybody who is an opponent of either is an opponent of both, and of property rights, and of ultimately of an individual's right to his own life, to interact with whoever he wants in whatever way he sees fit. And I think we should stand against those people and stand for free speech, for property rights, and for the free market, as it should be.
Thank you, Razi. I have a question for all of you. I didn't see any people who's watching us questioning you. So maybe they're gonna have the courage in a few minutes to do so. But before they do, I have a question for you regarding exactly what you said, and I want to make the public be very clear about this. Facebook changed their terms and of conditions, and they introduce a new paragraph saying that they can kick off any account without explanation if they consider it subjectively that account or the things that that person said being doing something that affect negatively their image. So in Romania, there is a huge discussion about this because people consider this like an attack to the free of speech. And I just take the opportunity because you are here to clarify this. Why this is not an attack to the freedom of speech? Who wants to start first?
I'll go first. So it's not an attack on freedom of speech, again, because it's Facebook's house. It's their platform. And you don't have a right to it. So and by the way, the terms and conditions are something people who use Facebook should look at and be aware of, and consider their actions within that. So if you're putting a lot of time and effort into promoting your business on Facebook, and you see that it's too great a risk because there's too big a chance of them kicking you off, maybe you shouldn't be putting all your eggs in that basket. I think this also goes to the PragerU example. I mean, PragerU has built a whole business that is basically on YouTube. So I completely understand why they would be worried about, or why they are unhappy with being negatively affected by changes in YouTube's monetization policies. I'm guessing that's the issue with Prager, right? I haven't delved into it too much, but again, you don't have a right to it, and it's always astonishing with these platforms that are completely free. I mean, it's not even a contract dispute, because you don't have a contract. You're going there and using something that they're putting out there. It's like I'm sure we all had this friend when we were young who wouldn't bring their wallet, and somebody had to pay for them. And if you cut them off at some point, they'll be pissed off because I'm used to not paying for it. Okay, but you don't have a right to it. So don't be pissed off. Create an alternative. Create your own Facebook.
Right. Paata, Nikos, who wants to
Yes, okay. Yeah, well, basically, I have to repeat what I said. Facebook is private space, private platform, and therefore they can decide to restrict someone to use this platform because they profit company. They need to keep the major audience to those who pay for their existence. So I'm having no problem with this. But point is that in political and economically, we should have alternatives. So me and others should be allowed to create alternatives. So economic freedom to do so. And there are many alternatives. For instance, more libertarianish guys already created, if I'm not mistaken, Gap. This is also platform Gap, which alternative to Facebook, maybe not that wide, but for those who are more tending to libertarian views. So those can extend if the Facebook ban libertarian point of views. It's just an example. And most important is that again, we should not consider Facebook or other media platforms as a common, the public one, and invite state to preserve rights which are not exist. Because if you are entering into somebody's private space, you should behave as the host is demanding from you.
Nikos.
So, yeah, one thing I want here to clarify. There's one thing that something can be a violation of your freedom of speech. So unless Facebook comes and follows you wherever you are with a club and starts beating you in the head because you said something, they're not violating your freedom of speech. Because again, you haven't got the right in their platform. Yet, there is something which is called cancel culture, which is, again, not a violation of your free speech, but it's very moral. For example, if I start a campaign saying because Razi and Nikos are objectivists, they should be fired from their job or kicked out of wherever of their landlord, they're not violating any of my rights. They're expressing their free speech, saying because objectivists are horrible to people, Nikos should never teach again in a university. Now, if someone does that, they're a horrible human being, and yet they're not violating my rights. So that's why I say, feel free to criticize Facebook if you want, although Razi made the great moral case for why Facebook is doing good in the world. We can agree or disagree with that. But there are two different things. So you can do something bad, again, for example, wanting to, quote, cancel someone without violating their rights of freedom of speech. So it's very important to be ready to criticize cancel culture, but not conflate it with censorship or violation of rights or whatever are the terms that conservatives are doing. I mean, what a pathetic spectacle, right? Literally tagging the president of the United States on Twitter and telling him, oh, Mr. President, look what Twitter did. You need to do something. So you're literally telling the guy who has the power of guns to attack a private business because you don't like their practices. And these are the people who every 4 years, they remember that the other sides are socialists and we're under danger. Give me a break.
Yeah, of course, this is exactly what I thought. Also, in my coaching business, I always recommended my clients to have their own platform, to have their own sites. Do not rely only on a Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. Of course, as Razi said, they are free. You do not pay for them, but you can raise your branding and so on. You can make a lot of money using freely this platform, so you don't have to complain if they do something with their property. Also, I want to ask you a final question because we have like 7 minutes till we end the panel. What is next? Because we have already an issue with the Facebook interference in election in US before, because Facebook is one of the most important platform, and they collect a lot of data from us. It has a lot of power. How can we prevent the interfere of the government and the politics making pressure to this kind of platforms?
Oh, sorry. By the way, we also have a couple of questions on the
Yes.
comments.
Oh,
so,
in the same time. Okay.
I'll give my turn to this round to the co-panelists so that we can also get to the questions audience.
Okay.
Or if they don't want to jump in, I can jump in.
Yeah, you can jump in, and also I put the
I can.
Razi, go on.
I'll just say briefly on the question of what's next. Yeah, what What scares me, I mean, Nikos mentioned tagging the president. The thing is, the current president, listens, and he is on board with that. He thinks that if they're censoring his side, then he should do something about it. So that is terrifying, and it's especially terrifying when it's in America, which actually has a constitutionally protected right to free speech, which we in Europe don't have, as far as I know, anywhere. Definitely not to that degree. And yeah, I think whatever is next. I mean, the left is not going to be against this. They love it. It's coming after or going after both hate speech and massive corporations at the same time is, the left is all about that. So I don't know specifically what's next, but I unfortunately can say it's probably not good at all.
Okay, let's come back to the question from the audience. Robert Bratescu asked, people usually agree that yelling fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire should be illegal and prosecuted. Should the government intervene in the same way when someone yells COVID is a hoax, or Bill Gates invented the virus on a crowded social media platform?
Can I go first on that?
Okay.
I will be the contrarian here. I don't think that anyone should fire you when you saw it fire in a crowded theater. Obviously, the theater owner should throw you out and never ever again allow you there. Maybe there's the case that someone could make a civil case that person, because of that person, I got injured or something. If I would be the judge, I'd be very careful on that, because it's what I said initially. Free speech also shows how you see people. I don't think that we are fragile automatons. I think that people can have the judgment that, even, let's take this extreme example, when someone shouts fire, they don't just start rushing. They say, oh, where's the fire? Oh, we're gonna get there's too much people there, I'm gonna run from there. So I understand that's a powerful example, but even there, I don't think it's a free speech issue, the fire in the theater. But with the COVID is a hoax, that's even clearer to me, because then it's up to the audience to judge. Your life is your responsibility. No one can live your life for you, and no one can think for you, right? If you believe that COVID is a hoax because a guy with a camera said so, and it has a big amount of view, it's your problem, right? Your life is your mind. As Ayn Rand said, I'm paraphrasing, like, I cannot digest for you, and therefore, in the same way, no one can think for you. So even if we ban, which, by the way, we have no right in terms of the police, but if Facebook, let's say, bans in their property where they have a right, people who say COVID is a hoax, anyone who believes that COVID is a hoax or that everyone's going to die, it's their responsibility. They have the responsibility to check the data, to think, and make up their own mind. So, yeah, don't yell fire in a crowded theater, but if you do so, I don't think the police should knock on your door.
I can add, if I may.
Yeah, Paata, of course.
Yeah, well, one more point to Nikos' intervention. Imagine if yelling fire is allowed. I mean, not allowed, but expected. It's possible. Then all theaters owners will be manage theater itself, to build it and organize it to minimize damage out of such kind of activity. So, let's give the owners and private entrepreneurs to manage this kind of issue.
Okay, Razi, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I agree with Nikos that people who hear somebody shout fire in a crowded theater would probably, look around and try to see where the fire is. But on the principle of the example, I do think, yeah, and there's a context here compared to COVID as a hoax. So, the context is, if you say something that is knowingly a lie, that is going to cause people to take action that is going to cause them harm, absolutely, that should be a crime. Now, on the COVID as a hoax, this is such a complex issue that, even whether or not you think it's a hoax, or certainly if you don't think it's a hoax, there's there's a wide range of actions possible to you, and I think it's a much more complex issue, and it's an issue where we still don't actually know that much about. Now, I certainly am certain that it is not a hoax, but there's a lot of unknowns there. There's no unknowns in the fire in a crowded theater example. There either is a fire that is a risk to people and they should rush out, or there isn't one. So I think this is an issue where probably shouting fire in a crowded theater is not free speech, because it would cause people to take action that is harmful to their lives and the lives of others.
Okay. Our time is up, so thank you very much for being part of this event and talking to all our audience. I know this subject is larger than we covered here. Maybe we're gonna do another kind of event just for freedom of speech and social media, maybe. And in 15 minutes, we're gonna have another panel. Nikos will gonna be the moderator. And first, I want to thank all of you for being part here in this panel. Thank you, Paata, and thank you, Razi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mirela.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day too.